Welcome back to Black Diamond Farms. So today's video is going to be about what we feed and how we feed it. This question was raised after our last video of making hay, of how we feed the hay and so on. So we're going to go over everything that we feed for the most part, between our grain and our bales. And when we say grain, we have a few different mixes of grains that we use. And in that, of course, when I say grain, it's corn and a multitude of grains mixed together, ground together. So one we have is just for a general 14% fitting. It's what we feed all of our animals. And then, of course, in the summertime, we lower the ration a little bit. In the wintertime, we up the ration by a few pounds. Then we have a calf mix that we just feed our calves until they're about 6 months old or so, give or take. There's a medicated version we feed them at first, and then they switch over to the unmedicated. And then, of course, we have a finishing ration that we feed our steers whenever they're finishing out. And what I mean by finishing out is about the last month to 2 months, we give them a special ration just for getting them ready to go to slaughter, whether that's to put a little more weight on them, to help the marbling, which of course is the fat content in the meat. So we do that with a special mix, which I don't have any right now, but I'll tell you about it. So as you can see, we have freezers here. They're just old freezers, and of course a show box here, but the freezers make a wonderful place to store the grain. It's protected from rodents, it stays dry. Unless you had water inside, unless something happens, should be no moisture getting inside. So we keep them in here all the time. This freezer here holds 600 pounds. So it does a really nice job. Of course, just to make it, in case I don't have to go get grain, anybody can know it holds 600. When we usually get about 11 to 1,300 pounds of grain at a time. But of course, we put it in here loose. We'll add it into this one just in the bulk bags, and then the show box will just get a bunch of miscellaneous stuff put in.
We dump it in straight. This is how it all comes. They come in 100-pound bags. Now you can, there's multiple ways to be able to get grain. Actually, we do it in the bag version. You could get it in what we call a bungee bag, which is a large bag, holds about 2,000 pounds, or you can always get it in a small grain bin. Now, when I say that, if you drive by a lot of dairy farms or hog farms or poultry farms, you'll see these small grain bins set up, and that's what I mean. Those will hold about anywhere between 3 to 10 ton. Usually is a normal figure. So, but we're small enough yet. We've been looking into the bin idea, but we're small enough yet that we still get 100-pound bags. I'd like to get away from the 100-pound bags just for the fact of lifting them. Don't mind lifting it, but when you're doing 10 to 15 of them at a time, by the time you get down to the 15th, you're ready for a grain bin.
So here's one type of our grain here. This is a 14% fitting. We buy all of our grain from Platt's Mills up in Spartansburg. They do a really nice job. It's usually always very consistent, very good product. So this is their 14%. As you can see the corn in here. I said, whenever you say you're feeding grain, there's usually a multitude of grains in the mix. This one here, like I said, all the yellow spots you can see are corn. And you want them to be cracked or ground down so that way the cow can digest them. Cows are kind of like humans. If the corn is whole, it will pass through the exact same way. You want to be able to see that white starchy center there. And in this mix at the label right here, it's their fitting ration. You can read all the proteins there. Down the list of the ingredients is corn, wheat, soybean, molasses, and calcium. Now those are all ground in together to make the feed. This is just one. We feed this to
all of our cows, for the most part, are adult cows and feeder steers. Our calves get a different mix, which I'll show you here in just a second. This is the base mix that we give everybody, just as a general ration. All right, here's our calf feed. So as you can see in the calf feed, it's got the corn, some oats, some pelletized supplements, and in this, here's the label. This is a medicated version. So here's the label. It's for calves 3 to 4 months old, as the label says. 18% moisture, so, or 18% protein, my bad. 18% protein. Now they are still, of course, on mom's milk, and they're eating grass and hay as well. This is just a good supplement to get them a good kickstart. And then once they hit that 3 to 4 month area, we'll switch them over. It's the exact same feed, it's just unmedicated.
So our finishing ration of grain, of course, like I said, I don't have any here, but all it is essentially is cornmeal and distillers mixed together. It's a dry distillers grain instead of being wet. Platt's called up there, talked to Scott, said this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want to do. Coming back within a half hour with a wonderful mix, and I'll tell you, it's, like I said, just a pretty simple cornmeal and distillers mix. Nothing special, but it does wonders. They grind it down pretty hard, almost to a powder, and it does great for finishing our feeders.
Something else that we add into our feeding ration here is something called calf manna. Calf manna is just a supplement product, which you can see here. It's for horses, beef cattle, dairy cattle, goats, rabbits, poultry, swine. Well, I even have deer on here. This basically is a performance supplement. We give it, you see all the analysis here for crude, fiber, protein, digestible, salt, sodium. And then it also gives a good little breakdown on how much you're supposed to feed beef calves, 10% of the creep, show cattle 1 to 2 pounds a day, and so on. I mean, it gives a pretty good breakdown for everything. Now, this is what it looks like. It's just almost like a purplish red colored pellet. All the nutrients are just packed into a pelletized form, and it has a licorice kind of smell to it. I don't care for licorice, so I don't really care for the smell, but they say the cows love it. This, for what we give it for, is the reason for one, as you see in here, it has selenium, and selenium is a big thing. If a cow is deficient on selenium when she's pregnant with her calf, that calf can have a selenium deficiency, which then can provide a multitude of issues once the calf is born. So of course we want to try to prevent that. The other thing is too, this just by feeding just a little bit of this every day will help their coat, will help shine up their fur. And we like our cows to look nice, so that's one of the reasons why we give it, is just for the show quality, to make the cows and calves a little bit better show quality, even though we don't personally show them, but we also want them to always look nice. So what we do here is we take it, we throw it into these troughs. All the cows come over, they eat out of them. This one here, the babies are kind of eating out of this one here. I haven't got them their grain yet, but you see, just throw it down in there. And you can see them just kind of slowly coming over and eating it up.
Going over minerals. Now there are minerals in our feed that are already in there. And selenium we had talked about a little bit. We were talking about the calf manna and how we don't want our cows to be selenium deficient. Just basically, for the biggest part, it's health for the cow and for the calf. And at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want a good healthy mom and a good healthy baby, because when they come out, we want them to hit the ground running. So one way they get their minerals is, of course, through their feed. And of course, there are some minerals that are tied into their hay as well, but they never get enough out of that. So here's one way. This is a selenium block in here. That one's actually a fly control block. So around here anyways, when you buy selenium, they're usually a green block. The brown or maroonish colored ones are usually a trace mineral, and then the white are a salt block. We do usually have all three of them here with us. Over in the other pasture, we actually have a round tub style mineral feeder, which I'll show you here. They just eat it loose out of there instead of having it like this. But however you get your minerals into your cows, it's a minerals and protein and everything is very important for the cow's health and the calf's health. And that's from feeder. As you see, kind of pretty muddy around here. We've got a lot of rain here this last week, and we've had another dosing last night in a pretty good storm. But this is our loose mineral feeder. So my wife bought this from Farmer Boy, which are from down the eastern part of the state. As you can see, just as it is, it's loose mineral. We also have a hard mineral block in here as well. But in here, we have loose mineral. What we do with this loose mineral is it comes in a bag, so instead of a hard form, it comes in this. Then we mix fly control product in here. We use Just a Fly. You put it in, you mix it in. I want to say they come in 1 pound bags or 2 pound bags of Just a Fly to a 50 pound bag of granular feed. Then the cows eat it up and does just what it says, good fly control. They ingest it, and then somehow it protects them from the flies. This thing's pretty easy to use for them. There's a little bit of a learning curve because they have to come over, flip their head up, flip their head underneath it, push it up, look underneath it. Once they got it, it worked pretty well. I said pretty easy to put together. You put this big rubber flap on, this other one, a washer, and then almost like a keychain just to hold it all on the top. And it was delivered to us via R&L on a semi-trailer on a pallet. So it didn't come UPS, which that's why I figured it would have come UPS and they would have just rolled it off at the house, but not the case. But it seems to be working quite well for us. Like I said, it gets in their system. That Just a Fly just seems to work wonders. I mean, one day they have flies, you put it in there, and within 2 days there are no flies on them at all. Okay, so the most common question we get is the difference between baleage, silage bales, wet bales versus dry bales. So wet bales versus dry bales, pretty cut and dry there, wet and dry. So what we have behind us here are dry bales. As you can see, they're dry. These are a year old. We keep them here in the barn so that way they stay out of the weather. With doing that, you're helping preserve all of that bale. If you leave them outside, usually the top, I don't know, about this much or so will become wet, soak down, and begin to rot. So of course you lose 4 inches of the whole way around the bale. And that's a lot of feed when you come down to the end of the year and talking about how many bales you need to make. But so the biggest difference, of course, between the bales and baleage is dry bales versus baleage is these are dried down to anywhere between 18 and 10% moisture content. So, and then good baleage should be anywhere between 50, 55 to high 30s. The biggest thing is for here in Pennsylvania is the time constraint that we have to make hay. It's not that we don't have enough time throughout the summer, it's a time for good days of weather. So to make dry hay, you need roughly about 4 dry days in a row, where with doing silage bales, you're looking at a day window. You know, if you can put down 10 acres, rake 10 acres and bale it in one day, you're golden. And then wrap it, of course, either that day or the next morning as soon as you can. So that's the biggest difference, or biggest issue of making hay here in PA is just the weather. Like this week here, today is our only dry day this week. And when I got up this morning, it was raining out. So that's the issue here. And then they're calling for chance of storms every day. Yesterday we had some good storms that rolled through. Like I said, that's the issue with making dry hay. The process of dry hay is mowing it, letting it sit for a day, going out and tedding it, which tedding is driving down the rows and spreading them out so it dries better. It essentially fluffs it all up, puts it out so it dries instead of being in the windrow where only the top is really drying. And then you gotta go down through, rake it, and then bale it. So that's the added, you have to run over the ground at least one more time, maybe twice with a tedding, just depending. Where with wet hay, you don't have to. Wet hay is just mow it down, rake it in a windrow, and then bale it. So that's one more piece of equipment you have to have is the tedder, and you got to run over at least once or twice more. So you're wasting that much more fuel and that much more time. We always seem to get, whenever we're talking about bales, and people ask us all the time, and we say, try to figure out how many bales we need per year to sustain the operation. So this here, 5 foot tall bale. So roughly a 5 foot tall bale with having 20 animals, 20 to, we have 22 right now. We'll just do it at 20 animals. This 5 foot tall bale will get us roughly 2 days. Sometimes 2.5, just depends on how cold the weather is. If it's colder, the cows will eat more. A little warmer out, they won't eat as much in the wintertime. So you think about that, every 2 days we're putting a new bale in. So that's 15 bales a month. And then do that by 6 months, you figure it out. We like to have roughly about 100 bales or so is what we want to have, is 100 to 125. That way we base our feeding on November 1st through April 1st. Now usually the cows don't come over until the middle of November from the summer pasture into the barn, so that saves you 15 days there. And then usually, like this last couple of years, the hay and grass in the pastures hasn't came up as fast. And, you know, we do put some fertilizer down for them. I just not getting that quick shot that we need them to get in the spring, so we're having to hold them in the barn until roughly first part of May, or the very first week of May-ish. So we always want to make sure we have extra. And if you have extra, then of course, then in the summer, you can feed them extra bales as a roughage for them. But that's one of the biggest questions we always seem to get is, how long is that bale going to last you? Well, now you know. Now, of course, every operation is different. The more cows you put out, the more hay you're going to need. So, like I said, 2 days for us, 2 to 2.5 days. For the next guy down the road who's making 4 foot bales, you know, that might be a day and a half versus a day. That's how much extra, you know, when you think about a 4 foot bale, you don't really think a whole lot. But when you're taking a foot off of a bale the whole way around, you're talking from here to here. You're talking 12 inches on that bale. That's a lot of feed on that bale. So that's one thing, you know, you'll see hundreds of bales sitting behind a barn. That's what you need to get yourself. We're out here with our wrap bales. Of course, the biggest difference everybody notices right from the get-go is the plastic wrap. This plastic wrap is put on to help preserve the bale. It's also put on there to help hold all the juices of the silage bale in there. So whenever you're looking at bales, usually first telltale sign is they're wrapped. Pretty good chance that they're wet bales or silage bales. Now you can, so I've heard, wrap dry bales. We have not tried this, but they call it cheap tin roof storage, which means if you don't have a barn, you can wrap them, keep them good. Because like I said, once that water starts getting on a dry bale, that top few inches and the whole way around start to rot. So you don't want that to happen. But anyways, in the case of these, this plastic wrap is holding all the moisture and juices inside, which is allowing them to ensile, which in better term is, when I say ensile, is turn into silage, which are taking the moisture and the sugars and juices from the plant, breaking them down with good bacteria, and they make a better forage. And when I say that, there's nothing wrong with dry hay. But wet hay is going to have more protein in it, because when the plant is mowed, that is when it's at its highest protein value. And then once it starts drying down, that protein dries out of there. Now dry bales are good for, they're high in fiber, of course, but they're lower on the protein end of it. Where these bales, of course, are going to be a little bit better in protein. So that's the reason why, one reason why we wrap it. Of course, like I said earlier, there is the weather window here. is not very good. So that also
So like I
helps.
had mentioned in that video before when we were talking about making the hay, these are the bales here that we made, these ones right here in a row right here, ones we made up there. Now right here is the telltale sign. Right there is the size difference in between what would be a 5-foot tall bale and a 4-foot tall bale. And like I said, the reason we did this was just that way we could pick them up. These are 50% moisture roughly is about what we had them as, which I was real happy about. But that's the weight difference in everything between very, very wet in, well, let's just say, that's the difference between 50% moisture here and 40% moisture in that bale. That's the difference of the weight difference of being able to lift it or not being able to lift it. Now, some of the pros to wrapping, of course, is shorter window to make hay and being able to let them ensile in there and make a better forage. And of course, the time frame that, and but a downside is you're storing them outside out here. And if a rodent comes by, they can nibble on the plastic here and put a hole in it. And whenever you get a hole in the plastic like this, it will actually begin to rot the bale in that area. But then that rot can turn into a much larger area. And the rot happens because whenever you're trying to make silage or baleage or chopping corn silage, whatever way, you don't want any oxygen in that bale. Once you get oxygen in that bale or into a silage pile, that is where it begins to mold, it begins to rot and get hot. So that's why you see, like whenever they're packing a bunk style, which is where they bring it in, they doze it up into a mound and then cover it. That's why they pack it in so tight. They want to pack it in tight, get all that oxygen out, and then seal it up good and tight. That helps preserve it the best, and then you don't have to worry about spoilage. Because anywhere you get spoilage, the cow is going to eat. So like I talked before, is if you're losing this much of your bale the whole way around, how much that equates to. Well, in this case, if you get a big spoilage spot and it's right here, they're not going to eat that spoilage spot. So you're going to have to get rid of that. And we want them to be able to eat, ideally, is 100% of the bale. But there's always a little bit of waste with a cow, where they pull it out, step on it, so on and so forth. But we want them to be able to eat as much as possible. The one thing you can note on all of our bales, this is one thing for sure, is this one in this case here was the date it was mowed and baled here, what it was, even though there was some clover in these bales, and then of course then the field name. And we do that on every bale, as you can see all the way up through. You can see one over there on that bale as well. But we do this that way whenever we bring them into the barn. We know, okay, that bale came from this field. Is there any weeds in that we need to take care of that I didn't see when I was mowing it? Did we do something wrong? Did we make it too soon? Did we, a whole list of things. But that's just a good reason. That's the reason we keep track. And also, we write them all down so that way we can track year to year. And whether you're tracking rainfall or tracking what you put on for fertilizer or lime, it's just a good habit to get into. And then also, it tells you what your cows are eating in that bale. Thanks for watching today, guys. Hopefully you learned something from this video. Hopefully it was a little bit more informative to tell you how we do things, and maybe in future videos here we'll break down the proteins in the bales and so on. And when we start cutting into these silage bales, we'll be able to show you a little better between dry versus wet. So maybe we'll do a little bit better video on just bales coming up this fall whenever we start actually cutting into some good silage bales, and give a side-by-side comparison to a silage bale versus a dry bale. So as you see, Miss Tilly back here, our other counterparts, everybody just kind of relaxing today. It's a little bit cooler day today after the rain yesterday. If you want to follow along what's going on the farm on a day-by-day basis, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Facebook's coming soon. And as you can see, Miss Tilly thinks it's time for her time, her personal time. And now she walks away. Gotta get a little rough up, and then she'll walk away. So hopefully you enjoyed the video today. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe.
like any questions, throw them down in there. Thanks for watching, guys.